Reclaiming Timeless Ways. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, glad to have you with us on another episode of, I guess I'm going to call Common Sense Conversations, right, Mike?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the goal of this, and ultimately you see things, and the goal is to improve upon things. And in fact, before we started this first recording, your very comment to me was, if one person watches each of the video, this is video number 41 we've created, right, and it makes an impact on one person a video, very satisfying for you.
Absolutely.
So, the assumption is maybe 40 folks out there, hopefully more,
right,
but if just 40 people were impacted by shows 1 through 40,
right,
worth the time, effort, and energy of putting your outlines together, kind of thinking it through and doing what we do. So,
and my request is, if you're the person that gets the value, please share it.
Pay it forward.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, episode number 41, Mike. Tell me which direction we are going.
Well, we're going to talk about worth versus disposable.
Okay.
So we were just in the back room. We'll start off with something physical. Mm-hmm. And I used your grinding wheel.
Yep.
And it's ancient, right?
she's an oldie.
Yeah. And it's little. It's not a huge industrial wheel. It was
right.
It was in your family.
Yep, my grandfather's.
Right? Okay.
Yep.
And it works.
Yep.
And we were able to take down an edge on a tool,
yeah,
and make it more properly functional.
Right.
And it was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes max. Yeah. And so
the average person might go back there, and I would pull it back on camera, but it would be a little bit of an effort.
Yeah.
But you'd look at this thing, and she looks very aged, and you might say, "That's a hunk of junk," to the curb.
In the garbage.
Right.
What a waste.
Yeah.
Because this thing might actually work for another 50 years if the idiots in the government don't take our electricity away from us along with everything else.
Right.
What a show. So, the thing with something like that is, you dust it.
Yeah.
You put a little paint on it every now and then, and a drop or two of oil on the bearing if it has a space for that.
Right.
And as long as you don't overheat it, it'll last a lifetime or two.
Right. I think it's going on a lifetime.
Wow. Yeah.
And it is. It's funny, this show almost, and you can go a lot of different directions, Mike, with worth versus disposable.
Right.
The theme of a lot of our shows, I was imagining at first you were going to take us down a road of us feeling worth, because sometimes we're made to feel disposable. But you're right, there are actually functional things like that, and there's a lot. If you sit back and honestly, nowadays, don't even have to sit back and think. You just go to your little phone and Google up some ideas. My father-in-law has an old truck that just keeps running and running and running. Well, there's been some different body pieces and or body problems on this thing. One of the most recent issues was the running board fell off. He just took a 2x4, painted it black, and got her bolted back up on the frame.
Now it looks slick.
And if you didn't look close, you wouldn't even know. And he said, that's just using a little ingenuity, a little upstairs, taking a piece of something he had in his garage, and saying, I can modify this to work. And how many things like that are there out there, Mike? We are, in many sense, very much a throwaway society. It's kind of how we're trained, isn't it?
Very much so. And so the thing is there a dividing line, a fence, an intellectual fence between not disposable things and not disposable people? And if there is that an artificial barrier, and shouldn't we be talking about both?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Why should we talk only about drill bits and not people?
Right.
So I remember being in a church once, and I won't say when or where, but it's been a number of years, and one of the greeters was somewhat affluent.
Okay.
And people would come in, and this greeter would put a huge amount of effort into explaining to people how wealthy they were.
Sure.
And describing, and he often did it to people that were somewhat limited and even on the edge of impoverished. And he made these people feel powerless by doing this, and it was an outrage for him to use that position of greeter, which means you are embraced and welcomed and valued.
Right.
And twisting the value and the meaning of that position into building himself at someone else's expense.
Yeah, more of a using that platform to say, look at me.
Right.
And as you're coming in, essentially, I'm going to make contact with you, eye contact,
Right.
maybe handshake, physical
Right.
contact. And so you've got the natural attention grabber,
Right.
and now you seek that as an opportunity, that platform as an opportunity
you
to
should see
showcase yourself.
You should see my new $200,000 pontoon boat.
Yeah.
And they're like, I can't afford tires.
Right.
Wow. You know, and it's like wrong use of position and power.
Yeah.
Wrong. So, you know, the question is, so he was doing what I call, which was why I stopped going to formal church, what I call the dance of showtime.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, if we're in church and we're putting on a show and we're demonstrating that we are of higher value, quote, I'm of higher value, nose up, than you, well, not you, but someone, right? Then I'm the problem.
Right.
I am the problem, no matter who I am. If I'm the elder or the pastor,
Sure.
I'm the problem.
Right.
Or just somebody that sits in the front row in their reserved seat because they donated
Right.
$5,000 for the roof fund.
Right.
You know, then I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And that should be disallowed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we start with a grinding wheel, and how long can it last? It's a treasure. So the thing is, what does it look like, or is it showy, showtime, but what's its value? What is its functional value? What can it do? Well, you talk to some old person, and you remember Joe Beal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Joe had a background in technology from when he was a kid. He went through some kind of couple of years of technical training. And I remember when he was getting very old, a couple of years, maybe a year or two before he passed, so he was very hard of hearing, and mentally he was slowed down. And I went into McDonald's one day, and he's sitting there with his wife and his son. And he was in a group of he was all alone in a group of people. And I came up to him and I said hi, and his wife is looking at me, Bert, and she's looking at me like, what's going to happen? And I said, my name's Mike. No. I said, what's your name? You know, and I had to speak up louder. She's like, can't you? So I'm making sure he can see my mouth and almost hollering, you know. And oh, it's Joe. So he shakes my hand. And I said, well, do you have that electric motor company? Yeah, I do. So what was that like? And so he tells me his whole life story, right? And he goes into a lot of detail. I think he went, I don't know, he was close to 100. And so he went through this technical training probably in the 50s, I'm guessing.
Sure.
And I mean, it was a fascinating story. I asked some questions, but I didn't really talk much.
Sure.
And he talked a lot. But his wife her eyes were just welled up with tears. And she's like, thank you. And I mean, I did it to be, quote, therapeutic, but not feeling sorry for him, therapeutic, but like, what is the living essence of this man?
Right.
Can I discover that? What can I help him express about himself?
Sure.
So he remembers who he is,
Yeah.
right? He speaks about who he is and what he's done, and tens and tens of thousands of hours of his knowledge and skill and productivity that he's helped other people with.
Sure.
And she's like, thank you so much. It really helped him. And he's all alone and he's isolated. I said, he's still a smart guy.
Yeah.
You know? But he just had this, it was almost like he was in a bubble
Sure.
because of he was mentally declining, but not gone, not by a long stretch.
Sure.
And when you got him to think about and remember visual and tactile memory and interactional memory, he came back.
Yeah.
He was back fully functional.
Sure.
For an hour or more.
Right.
Right? So he didn't feel dead.
Yeah.
For that hour, he was actually real and alive and of value.
Yeah.
Because he was real and alive and of value.
Sure.
It wasn't a Disney cartoon. That was really who he was,
Right.
right? And he had this wealth in him. So that was one thing. So what is the value of a man, you know? Well, you have to actually sit, or a woman, you have to, or a child, you know, or an animal. What you have to do is visit with them
Right.
and find out, who are you? What do you do?
Right.
You know, what's interesting to you? What's valuable?
And everybody does have value
Oh,
of some
absolutely.
sort.
Yeah, they do.
And not
do.
necessarily by the definition of what, we're not asking what is in their bank account.
No, we're not. No, not your net worth, your
Right.
value.
Your value.
Right.
I think sometimes that can get messed up pretty quickly and easily.
It gets obscenely skewed.
Right.
And we throw away this for that.
Right.
You know? So, in the process of the next thing I had written something about was, do you act selflessly? And so, if we see people who are suffering, one of the things we have to do is meter our energy, right? So it's like, how much do I have to give? And one of the questions that I have been finding myself asking more is, if the person is a professional victim, you can't help them.
Right.
Because they're not interested in being helped.
Right.
They're just interested in being the center of attention.
Yeah.
So that would be like a drama queen
Right.
of one sort, or boy queen, girl queen. not in that pronoun garbage sense, but just in the sense of they want to be in the center ring of the circus, you know, and have endless applause and people.
Someone recently brought up this little phrase for those people. They're the ones that are walking around with their own body chalk in their purse, you know, and that's true. They're constantly the victim.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's like without that, they like cease to exist. They
Yeah.
start to freak out, almost like they're on acid. And it's like, who am I? Where are my boundaries? Where's my skin?
Sure.
The only thing I have is my victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a one-act play, but it's a terrible play.
Yeah.
And it's a waste of everyone's energy.
Sure.
So, like, if you're talking to somebody, let's say I'm talking to somebody and they're like, man, I'm just dragging my butt and I have no energy. When's the last time you went to the doc?
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, that's not going to do it. Oh, okay, so that's a strike, right?
Right.
It's like, well, you know, how's your B vitamin intake? How old are you? Are you absorbing B vitamins? Or are they just passing through you because you don't have the right gut chemistry to absorb them? It's very common after, say, 60.
Yeah.
Or, you know, did they gain a lot of weight, and is there something wrong with their thyroid?
Sure.
You know, stuff like that. And if they go, no, that's not it, about the fourth, that's not it, what they're doing is you're in their tractor beam.
Yeah.
They're the victim, and they're going to hold you captive. You have to cut that.
Yeah.
So what you say is, well, I'm making some common sense, logical suggestions to you, and you're refusing to really look at any of them. So I'm afraid I don't have any.
I can't help you.
I can't
Yeah.
help you.
Yep.
I wish I could, but I can't.
Right.
And I'm concerned that maybe you're not interested in being helped. You're interested in being attended to.
Yeah.
Right. You want an audience.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, if you're addicted to drama, no one can help you because you don't know what your problem is.
I'm not going to watch your show. I'm turning the channel, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. To unplug the television. Right. So the next one, and it's similar, and that is, what is a gentleman? If somebody says you're a gentleman, does that mean that you have manners, or that you're being set up to be somebody's servile lackey, right? And it's like, because both of those things happen.
Sure.
You know? I mean, I remember once, right after I got hurt, and I was feeling terrible, because my communication skills were impaired. So I was feeling very isolated. And I remember just kind of embroiled in that feeling, because we get that when bad things happen. And this was a bad thing that has taken years to resolve, right? But it's a slow process of inclination, of
Sure.
improvement. But I remember I was walking into this grocery store, and this old woman comes dragging herself along, and I opened the door for her, and she just lit up with the most grateful smile.
Right.
And it was like, oh, I got reacquainted with my value
Yeah.
in opening a door.
Yeah.
Completely unexpected and unplanned, right? But it was almost like completing a circuit.
Sure.
So there's lots of times when we help somebody, they dropped a package, or we open a door for them, or we encourage them, or give somebody a bag of food, whatever it is. And it's necessary. So connected to that is, what is the honest purpose of and the limits of honest chivalry? Right? How much of chivalry is a cage for men,
Yeah.
and an entitlement throne for women,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of people going to be angry at this. I don't care,
Yeah.
right? There's no entitlements here
Yeah.
for either.
I guess that's a tough question. I guess versus saying a limit, in my opinion,
Right.
it's based on what's reciprocated. In
Okay.
other words,
Very
in my
interesting.
opinion,
Yes.
if you're constantly giving, and the other party's receiving, and I'm not saying they have to open the door for me next time.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a scorekeeping scenario.
Right.
But are they in some capacity filling your tank in return?
Right.
If they are, I think it's pretty limitless. And I
agree.
think that's in any relationship. But if
agree.
there's just a leech constantly sucking on the vein,
Right.
well,
Right.
then that limit we reach it really quickly.
Well,
So
we
who is
should.
that person, or how quickly do we identify the motive
Right.
of that
And-
other individual?
But the social expectations can create an anesthesia of unawareness.
Yeah.
Because we are so hypnotized by the expectation that we're supposed to be the gallant fool who literally throws a $500 leather coat on a puddle
Sure.
so somebody doesn't get mud on her tiptoes.
Sure.
It's like, really? Really?
Right.
Really? That's the program you want?
Right.
Oh no, that's the program I must have. Really? Who told you that?
Yeah.
Everyone. Really? Who's that?
Yeah.
And they're afraid.
Yeah.
So they're going to act this out, and God forbid you question that.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they're going to be angry at you because they earn peace, or they buy peace by keeping that role, and they're afraid of losing peace or losing inclusion
Yeah.
if they refuse the role. So if you're a threat to their role, you're a threat to their inclusion. So they will blow up,
Sure.
right? And that's why.
Yeah.
So this is the same idea about being a gentleman or having chivalry. You have two young kids, and there's two druggy women out in the street going at it with knives. What do? I let them kill each other.
Yeah. Again, it's all.
I walk away, and I call 911 from a distance.
Sure.
I'm not-
And that's the right move. Anytime there's weapons involved,
Right.
especially
Right.
when there's weapons involved. But yeah, what is the limit or the expectation? I don't know. In my mind, that's so hard to answer, because under that circumstance, I'm
Right.
not going to have any chivalry.
None.
But
Zero.
with my wife, who does fill my tank in return
Right.
and
Well,
gives me,
that's
in other words,
different.
that's a different level.
That's a
And then there's a
different-
lot of relationships in between those two
Yes,
examples.
there are. Exactly. Right. So, you pick up a baseball bat or a 4x4 or whatever, and you hit a home run,
Right.
and the fight's over because it's somebody who's precious to you.
Sure.
Not two animals who are going to stop for 5 minutes and then do it again and again and again.
Right.
So they're worthless to me.
Yeah.
To me, they're worthless.
Yeah.
They're not worth me getting cut or injured or dead.
Right.
They're not worth that.
Right.
So along with that is how does a man say no?
N-O?
No, you know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair question.
Right.
And I mean, it goes so much deeper. You know, I think you can piece a lot of the other shows together that we've done.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but
Oh, do.
you know, it becomes easy when you understand the situation. But so often, this show's trying to shake you into looking at yourself from an outside perspective,
Right.
looking in and saying,
Are you trapped?
"Have you identified this situation?" Because I was also, you know, I was in a previous marriage that ended in divorce,
Okay.
and in that moment, for a good chunk of that moment, you don't see what you see once you're out of that moment. Does that make sense, Mike?
Right.
So in that moment, there was nothing, and I remember like my sister and others trying to, you know, hey, but
Simon in there?
but I wasn't hearing
Hello?
it. I had blinders on.
Right.
So
You're
in that moment,
anesthetized.
no wasn't really an option. But when you get out, you look back and say, "What an idiot I was," you know. But I also give myself some grace in the sense
Right.
that I can say that about myself today. It's like a
Right.
Monday quarterback. So that's a real tough one, Mike. I mean, it should be
It is.
an easy word, but it's not always based on the
It is.
scenario. It
So
really,
you have to have grace.
you do. You give yourself grace and just be willing to. I guess you have to step outside of the circle you're in and try to look into your circle, and that's hard.
Right. Yeah, and with some things, I mean, if you wish that you knew more than you knew at the time and you didn't, and something there was a terrible price. If you keep visiting that, thinking almost like you're watching a movie and trying to change the outcome. First of all, it's already done. It's finished. You know, somebody's bleeding to death, and you don't know how to stop their bleeding.
Right.
And then you come back and you go back in that movie and you replay it again and again. You're replaying it because you want to create a different outcome.
Sure.
Your irrational mind is entering into your rational mind, and you're still desperately panicked to fix it.
Right.
But it's done. And you have to tell yourself, stop, this is done.
Yeah.
And you have to give yourself enough kindness and love to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing is when you say no, you have to be, at least to yourself, be able to elaborate when you're saying no to this, it's because you're saying yes to that.
Right.
So what is it that I'm saying? No, you can't borrow my car and go to Arizona because I use it.
Right. Right.
And because I would be in trouble without it. What if I need to go to the doctor or the store,
Right.
or I just want it?
Right.
You know, I'm not in a position to loan you my car for
Sure.
a week,
Sure.
right? And if you wreck it, you can't afford to buy me a new one, right?
Sure.
So I'm the wrong person to be your resource.
Yeah.
And then if they do the weepy routine and make you the villain,
Right.
if you're not the savior, then you're the villain. And you have to identify that. Say, no, I'm not your savior, because if you tell me I'm your savior, you're programming me to say yes. You're maneuvering me,
Right.
and I can't be maneuvered here. This is beyond my capacity to
Sure.
give, right? And this is not something I can afford to give. So I'm neither a villain nor a savior.
Sure.
I'm a person with a little bit of resources, but not for what you need.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I wish I could help you, but I can't, right? So when you elaborate that, then you begin to separate yourself from that maneuvering of the trap.
And you determine their motive, because if at that point they can't understand you, they're probably somebody you want cut out of your world.
Right.
You know, the simplest example I can think of with two little kids is no little kid wants to hear no. That instantly turns them into a fit mode, right? But when you are able to explain the whys and the circumstances, they still may not like it,
Right.
but there's understanding. And when somebody has that understanding, which is what you've done through your elaboration, and isn't accepting of that yet, well, then probably not somebody you want in your circle. Period.
No, if it's a pre-rational child, it's one thing. But
Correct.
If it's an adult, and that's their skill set,
That's what I mean. Yeah.
right, that's a terrible trap.
Right.
So, and this connects up to that, this is the last part of it, and that is the long-term price of shutting up can be extremely expensive.
Right.
You know, in a marriage, in a relationship, parent-child, in work, you know, in medicine, in any number of areas. When we become quiet to pacify somebody, we enable them to become worse.
Right.
So we have to speak up. And the
Right.
question is, how do I stop and say, look, with all due respect to your position or our relationship, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to work for me. And here's the what and the why.
Yeah.
And then you state it,
Yeah.
you know? I told somebody recently that I was not going to be in a position to really want to listen to their advice,
Yeah.
you know? Or told a third party about that. And I didn't care how much education they might get someday. It's not my obligation to be subservient to their, quote, superior expertise, which at this point is imaginary anyway, but it's not my obligation to listen.
Sure.
You know, thank you for wanting to help me. I might take it into consideration. That's not the same as I'm going to listen to what you tell me.
Sure.
So that's it.
Simple enough. So, interesting topic.
Yeah, yeah.
And some good little interesting sidebars. Of course, if you found any of this of value, again, Mike, the goal is that you might share that. And even if maybe this wasn't the one for you, there could be someone out there that needs this tidbit of conversation. So please still, not only do we hope you subscribe to the YouTube channel, but we hope you share them out in your various social media platforms so others might take a little dive and dose and see if it fits their world. It's people helping people, and you're part of it. We're here recording the program, but you're the ones who can help spread the word. So we appreciate that, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Reclaiming Timeless Ways. Have a great day.